Hey, I'm Trey. Not all serial killers are born that way. Some are cultivated over time. Pierre Legree was an abused child that cultivated that pain and suffering until he became an adult. He then learned to spread his pain and misery to everyone he came in contact with. So you should stick around till the ending to see how this sad story unfolds. Please leave any comments or suggestions in the comments section because I'm always interested in your opinions. If you're interested, I upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. Well, if you're ready, let's get started. 1896, in the country of France, Pierre Legree was born. Pierre, growing up, had a great relationship with his mother and a terrible relationship with his father. Pierre was the oldest of his two siblings, which caused him to be held more accountable to his father for his siblings' actions along with his own. His father would give him a task to take care of, and if he didn't do them properly, his father would beat him severely. If his younger two siblings got into trouble, his father would beat him severely for not intervening. Based on Pierre's testimony, his father would beat him for almost anything that he was unhappy about. He was also a pathological liar. Pierre would resort to lying regularly in a feeble attempt to avoid from being beaten by his father. Pierre began to have anger issues. At age 7, Pierre began to rebel against his father by becoming a compulsive thief. When Pierre was 15 years old, he grew tired of the emotional and physical abuse of his father, so he ran away from home. Pierre decided he wanted to go to the Americas. He signed up to become a crewman on a ship. That ship took him to Canada, where he abandoned his job due to being regularly teased by his crewmates. He went to Buffalo, New York, and found a job at a hotel. During his time there, he wrote his mother regularly. This was around the same time that World War I began. Many French families reached out to everyone in order to help defend their country from Germany. This included Pierre's mother. She would send him money regularly and demand that he return home to help fight. Whenever his mother became upset with him, she would stop sending money. Ever since Pierre was a child, his mother used to always pamper and spoil him to compensate for his father's mistreatment. This enraged him so much because he felt robbed of his childhood by his father. Pierre was very prideful and felt like he deserved anything that his mother could give him. Pierre decided to come home at that point to make some money and to relieve some of his anger. He felt the best way to accomplish this was to join the military to help the war effort. During his time in France, he was stationed near a small village in France. He and one of his colleagues, who happened to be a soldier by the name of Eduardo, happened to become good acquaintances. Eduardo was known to Pierre to carry a small sack of money attached to a necklace that he wore around his neck regularly. Pierre would occasionally ask Eduardo how much money was in that sack. In most cases, he would not respond. In other cases, he would either deflect or joke about it. Pierre was sure that it contained a substantial amount. Eduardo was known to drink alcohol like a fish drinking water. One evening, Pierre invited him out for some drinks at a local pub. Eduardo eventually became stumbling drunk and needed to make it back to the military base. Pierre then put Eduardo's arm around his neck and began to drag him slowly back to the base. Unfortunately, instead of the base, he took him to an isolated theater. Pierre then struck him on the back of the head with a large liquor bottle that he brought with him. The bottle smashed against his head, dropping Eduardo to the ground face down. He then somehow produced a club. He took that club and repeatedly bashed the back of his skull in way past the point of him being killed. It was alleged that the skull was completely pulverized. Pierre's rage had got the best of him. He totally forgot about his objective, and he was now covered in blood and brains. Immediately after, Pierre went back to the military base. The body was found by local residents and the authorities were notified. Pierre denied seeing Eduardo after parting ways with him after the pub. The police had no witnesses or leads, so the case was labeled unsolved. In order for Pierre to convince the family of the victim that he was not involved with his demise, he put on an emotional performance for them. He began to cry out loud, then threatened to kill any person involved with Eduardo's murder. Now, isn't that something? You're the last person seen with the victim, but yet you don't know how or who could have killed your best friend? No, that doesn't seem suspicious at all to me. He began to hang around the victim's family in a feeble attempt to show support. It was alleged at the funeral, Pierre began to act belligerent by crying, falling down on the floor, and screaming over the loss of his murdered friend. Since no one was buying his performance, he chose to keep his distance from them. They were probably like, "Man, stop playing and get off the floor. We know you did it." Pierre then found another associate of his that he felt worthy to rob. That associate's name was Miss Montereau. He chose to visit her one evening to see if he could find something about her living situation before he robbed her. She was a single mother with 2 children, an 8-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. Miss Montereau heard about the performance that Pierre played at the funeral, so she did not welcome him with open arms when he arrived at her home. She sounds like a very intelligent woman. She immediately smacked Pierre in his face when he came to the door. Pierre then beat her to the brink of death with his hands by punching, kicking, and then stomping her head to the ground. After he was done, he robbed the home. During his search, he ran into Miss Montereau's 2 children. The 2 young children fled in fear. They ran through the house and hid in order to escape this psychotic killer who just murdered their mother. He eventually caught up with each child. Then he took out a pocket knife and slit their throats from ear to ear. They both instantly died. You can imagine how these 2 children felt to find their mother killed and then being too young to defend themselves and not old enough to escape the house that they were now trapped in. Their mother eventually died of her injuries at the hospital later that evening. Unfortunately, I have bad news. The killer didn't die after spreading all of this misery and pain. But on a good note, unbeknownst to the killer, he was seen exiting the house by several neighbors. The following day, the victims were found in the house, and that's when the neighbors shared their information with the authorities. The police immediately located and arrested Pierre for the suspicion of murder. During the interview, he denied being responsible for any murder. The investigators observed that Pierre had scratches on his face that looked like it was from the result of a fight. They also found bloodstains on his clothing that appeared to have been partially washed. After being confronted with the evidence, Pierre confessed to the killing of the mother and the 2 children. He was sent to prison until his impending trial date. While in prison, he attempted to escape by disarming a guard and stabbing him along with another guard with a bayonet. While injured, both guards notified their colleagues and they were able to apprehend Pierre before he was able to escape. Pierre was eventually given a trial, found guilty on all charges, and given a death sentence. Now faced with his inevitable demise, he pled, cried for mercy, and confessed to 2 additional homicides that he committed while in New York. This was back when he was in the United States. He also confessed to the murder of his colleague, Eduardo, who served alongside of him in the military. Pierre's murder count was 6 in total. He was charged for 4 killings in France. No information was provided on the status of the other 2 murders back in the United States. In 1916, Pierre was executed by firing squad. Good riddance. If you enjoy more stories such as these, click the suggested videos above. I upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. God bless and stay safe.